just coming up with our basic equation. Next, we're going to define the variables. So we're going to decide what we're going to let the first book equal and what we're going to let that last book equal. And in doing so, we need to think about which one's based on the other. Is the first book based on how many pages are in the last book, or is the last book based on how many pages are in the first book, based on how it's written? So we could say F equals L minus 180. And of course, the last book would be L. So when we substitute F with what we now know, we're going to let it equal L minus 180. And then we're going to substitute the last book with the L, and we have that equaling 1,230. So now we're going to change subtraction to addition, and we are going to add our like terms. So we get 2L plus negative 180 equals 1,230. Good. Now we're going to add 180 to both sides. We end up with 2L equals 1,410. What do we do, everybody? Excellent. Multiply by the reciprocal of 2, which is 1/2. So now we're going to do cross canceling, which is where our division comes in. So 2 goes into 14 7 times, goes into 1 0 times, but it goes into 10 5 times. So L equals 705. What's our units? Pages. And now we can substitute into F and capital L and figure out our number of pages. So after we substitute 705 in the place of lowercase l to figure out how many pages the first book has and how many pages the last book has, we can then do a check step just to make sure that this works. And the check step is really easy. What are we going to do?
Add them together.
Right. We add the two together. We're going to add our 525 plus 705 pages. And hopefully we'll end up with 1,230. And we did. So we know we did it right. Yay! I have 3 less than twice the number of MP3s of Puneet. Together we have 90 MP3s. How many MP3s does Puneet have? So our initial equation is going to be I plus P, I being me, equals 90. So now we need to define these two variables, since we can't really solve with those two variables. So since how much I have is based on how many Puneet has, I'm going to put lowercase p as our variable, and I have 3 less than twice the number of MP3s of Puneet. So since I have twice the number and 3 less than that, it's going to be 2p minus 3. So I'm going to substitute what we defined for I and what we defined for p in the place of those two in my equation. I get 2p minus 3 plus p equals 90. So next, I'm going to change subtraction to addition and then add like terms. I get 3p plus negative 3 equals 90. And we're not going to solve the rest of this because at this point you guys should be pretty comfortable with solving these. It's just setting them up as the challenge. So here's a couple of different examples of how you could set up an equation for this problem. We know that we have to find the amount of money that we're allowed to spend. So the amount of money that we're allowed to spend. And we divide that by $25,000 to see how many cars we can buy. But instead of having a division equation, let's write it with multiplication. And we will end up dividing because we know that we always divide in order to solve a multiplication equation by multiplying by the reciprocal and then cross-canceling. So here we end up with 25,000x equals 80% of 650,000 because if I save 20%, that means I can spend 80%. So that's one way you could set it up. Another way you could set it up if you want to show every single piece of how you get everything is to say the amount that you have, which is $650,000, and subtract the amount that you have to save, $650 times 20%. And that's going to equal 25,000x. Either one of those would be just fine. And then for solving, so we'd end up with $25,000 x equals 80% of 650,000, which equals 520,000. Then we multiply by the reciprocal on both sides, which is the same thing as dividing by 25,000. And we can just do our division over to the side. And when we do, we're going to end up with x equals 20.8. But we can't get part of a car, so we can afford 20 full cars.